At 12:30 a.m., my friend texted me, "Bro, your fiancée's all over some guy on the dance floor." I got dressed, drove to the club, and walked in just as she wrapped her arms around his neck. She froze, then started screaming. I confronted them. He got cocky. I hit first. Security pulled us apart while she kept yelling. Afterward, I sent the video to her brother, the one who paid for half the wedding. By the next evening, her plans collapsed. And so did her life. The glow of my phone screen cut through the darkness of my bedroom at exactly 12:30 a.m. 3 years of engagement, 2 months before our wedding, and my best friend Jake was sending me a message that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. The text contained a single sentence that made my blood freeze in my veins and sent electric shocks through every nerve in my body. My fiancée Christina was supposed to be having a quiet girls' night with her sister and 2 cousins at their usual spot downtown. The plan had been simple and innocent according to what she told me earlier that evening. They would grab dinner, maybe catch a movie, and be home by 11. Nothing extraordinary, nothing that would raise any suspicions in my mind after 3 years of complete trust between us. Jake's message contained details that painted a completely different picture of her evening activities. He described seeing her at the upscale nightclub on 5th Street, the one with the pounding bass and dim lighting where people went to lose themselves in the crowd. She was wearing the black dress I had bought her for our anniversary last year, the one that hugged her curves perfectly and made heads turn wherever we went together. But she was not alone, and she was definitely not with her sister or cousins anywhere in sight. Jake described a tall man with dark hair and an expensive suit who seemed to know her extremely well based on their body language and intimate interactions. They were dancing closely together in ways that suggested this was not their first meeting or their first time being physical with each other. My hands started trembling as I read the follow-up messages that came flooding in one after another. Jake was providing a live commentary of events as they unfolded before his eyes on the crowded dance floor. The descriptions became increasingly detailed and increasingly damaging to everything I believed about the woman I was planning to marry in 8 weeks. The man had his hands on her waist, pulling her body against his as they moved to the rhythm of whatever song was playing through the club's sound system. She was laughing at something he whispered in her ear, tilting her head back in that way she used to do when we first started dating, and everything was new and exciting between us. Her fingers were playing with the collar of his shirt while they danced. Jake sent another message explaining that he had been at the club with some colleagues celebrating a promotion when he spotted her across the room. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him in the strobing lights and haze of the crowded venue. But when he moved closer to get a better view, there was absolutely no mistaking who he was looking at or what was happening right in front of him. My mind raced through every conversation we had shared over the past few months. Every late night, she claimed to be working overtime at her marketing firm. Every weekend, she spent visiting her family in the suburbs. Every time she seemed distracted during dinner or distant when we were watching television together on the couch. Suddenly, all of those moments took on new meaning and painted a picture I never wanted to see. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced in my 28 years of life. This was not just cheating or stepping outside our relationship for one moment of weakness. Based on what Jake was describing, this appeared to be an ongoing affair that had been developing right under my nose while I was planning our future together. I threw off my covers and stumbled toward my closet in the dark room. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely grab a shirt and jeans from their hangers. The adrenaline was coursing through my system like poison, making my heart race and my thoughts scatter in 1,000 different directions all at once. 20 minutes later, I was in my car speeding through the empty streets toward downtown. Every red light felt like an eternity as I sat there imagining what I would find when I arrived at the club. Part of me hoped that Jake had made a mistake, that it was just someone who looked like Christina from a distance. But deep down I knew that hope was foolish and naive. The bass from the club was vibrating through the sidewalk as I approached the entrance. The bouncer barely glanced at my identification before waving me through the doors and into the chaos of flashing lights, pounding music, and bodies pressed together on the dance floor. The air was thick with perfume, alcohol, and sweat from hundreds of people losing themselves in the Friday night atmosphere. I pushed through the crowd, scanning faces in the dim lighting while my heart hammered against my ribcage. The music was so loud that I could feel it in my chest, but somehow my hearing seemed enhanced as I listened for her laugh or her voice calling out over the noise. Every blonde head turned in my direction made me think I had found her. Then I saw them near the back corner of the dance floor, exactly as Jake had described in his messages. Christina had her arms wrapped around the neck of a man I had never seen before in my life, and they were moving together like longtime lovers who knew each other's bodies intimately. The sight hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. She was wearing the black dress and the pearl necklace I had given her for Christmas. Her hair was styled the way she only did it for special occasions. This was not a chance encounter or a moment of weakness influenced by too much alcohol. This was planned and deliberate, and had probably been happening for months while I worked late shifts to save money for our wedding. The moment Christina's eyes met mine across the crowded dance floor, her face transformed from pleasure to absolute terror in less than a second. The blood drained from her cheeks as she recognized me standing there in the crowd, watching her betray everything we had built together over the past 3 years. Her arms dropped from around the stranger's neck like dead weights. The man she had been dancing with noticed her sudden change in demeanor and turned to follow her gaze directly toward where I stood. Instead of showing embarrassment or shame at being caught in this compromising situation, his expression shifted into something that looked almost like amusement. He seemed to find the entire scenario entertaining rather than awkward or concerning. Christina started screaming my name over the pounding music, but not in a way that suggested she was happy to see me or trying to call me over to join them. These were screams of panic and desperation, the sound of someone who had been caught red-handed and knew their world was about to collapse around them. Other club patrons started turning their heads to see what was causing the commotion. I pushed through the remaining crowd that separated us, feeling the anger build in my chest with every step I took in their direction. The stranger had the audacity to put his arm around Christina's waist in some kind of protective gesture, as if he had any right to touch the woman who was supposed to become my wife in 8 weeks' time. When I finally reached them, Christina was trying to form words, but only managing to stammer out incomplete sentences that made no sense. The music was too loud for normal conversation, but the three of us were close enough now that we could hear each other if we spoke directly into someone's ear. The atmosphere around us felt charged with tension and impending violence. The stranger spoke first, leaning close to my ear and saying something that made my vision go red with rage. He told me that Christina had been with him every Friday night for the past 4 months, and that she had never once mentioned having a fiancé or being engaged to anyone. He claimed she had introduced herself as single and available when they first met at this same club back in March. Christina tried to interrupt his revelation by grabbing his arm and telling him to stop talking, but he shook her off and continued speaking directly to me. He described intimate details about her body that only a lover would know, things that made it crystal clear this was not just dancing or innocent flirtation. They had been sleeping together regularly while she came home to me and acted like the devoted fiancé. The man then made a mistake that sealed his fate for the evening. Instead of backing down or showing any remorse for his part in destroying my relationship, he became cocky and confrontational. He suggested that maybe Christina had chosen to be with him because he could offer her things that I obviously could not. His words were designed to humiliate me in front of her and anyone else who might be listening to our exchange. Without thinking or considering the consequences, my fist connected with his jaw in a punch that sent him stumbling backward into other dancers. The satisfying crack of knuckles against bone was barely audible over the music, but I felt the impact travel up my arm and release some of the rage that had been building inside me since I first read Jake's text message. The stranger recovered quickly and lunged back at me with his own fist aimed at my face. We crashed into the people around us as we traded blows in the middle of the dance floor. Christina was screaming at both of us to stop fighting, but her voice was lost in the chaos of music, shouting, and the sound of our bodies colliding with furniture and other club patrons. Within seconds, 2 massive security guards appeared and grabbed both of us by our shirts. They dragged us apart with professional efficiency, preventing what could have escalated into a much more serious altercation. The stranger's lip was bleeding and my knuckles were already starting to swell from the impact of hitting his face. The security team escorted both of us toward the exit while Christina followed behind, still screaming and trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen. But her words were just noise at this point because nothing she could say would change what I had witnessed with my own eyes. The damage was done and irreversible. Outside on the sidewalk, the cool night air hit my face like a slap of reality. The stranger was holding a cocktail napkin to his bleeding lip while glaring at me with pure hatred. Christina was pacing back and forth between us, her high heels clicking on the concrete as she tried to figure out how to salvage this impossible situation. She started telling me that it was not what it looked like, that she could explain everything if I would just give her a chance. But her explanations were contradicted by what the man had already told me about their 4-month relationship and their weekly meetings at the club. There was no reasonable explanation that could make this betrayal acceptable or forgivable. The stranger got into a black BMW parked at the curb and drove away, without saying another word to either of us. Christina watched him leave with an expression that told me everything I needed to know about her feelings for him. She was not just cheating on me physically, but had developed genuine emotions for this other man. Standing there on the empty sidewalk with the woman I thought I knew completely, I realized that our entire relationship had been a lie for months. Every kiss, every intimate moment, every conversation about our future together had been tainted by her deception. She had been living a double life with the skill of a professional actress. Jake appeared at my side within minutes of the fight ending, having followed the commotion from inside the club to the sidewalk where Christina and I stood in the aftermath of my confrontation with her lover. He was holding his phone in his hand, and the expression on his face told me that he had captured something significant during the chaos of the past hour. The video on his phone screen showed everything in crystal clear detail, despite the dim lighting of the club interior. It began with Christina dancing intimately with the stranger, their bodies pressed together in ways that left no doubt about the sexual nature of their relationship. Her hands were running through his hair while he whispered in her ear and kissed her neck. The footage continued through the moment when she first spotted me in the crowd, capturing the terror that washed over her face when she realized she had been caught. It showed her desperate attempts to push the man away and create distance between them, but it was far too late to hide what had already been recorded for posterity. Most damaging of all, the video captured the stranger's revelation about their 4-month affair, including his claim that Christina had told him she was single and available. Jake had positioned himself close enough to record the audio of their conversation, despite the loud music that filled the club atmosphere. Christina begged me not to do anything with the video, promising that she would end her relationship with the other man and devote herself completely to repairing our engagement. She claimed that her affair had been a moment of weakness that got out of control, but that her true feelings were still with me and our planned future together. But her desperate pleas felt hollow and manipulative after everything I had witnessed and learned over the past 2 hours. The woman standing before me was a stranger who had been deceiving me with remarkable skill for months while I worked extra hours to pay for our wedding venue, catering, and honeymoon expenses. Jake handed me his phone and told me that I needed to do something with the evidence before Christina had a chance to create her own version of events. He reminded me that her brother Ryan was contributing $15,000 toward our wedding expenses, money that represented a significant portion of his annual salary at the construction company where he worked. Ryan had always been protective of his younger sister, but he was also a man who valued honesty and loyalty above all other character traits. He had welcomed me into their family 3 years ago because he believed I was good for Christina and would take care of her properly. Learning about her betrayal would devastate him almost as much as it had devastated me. The decision to send Ryan the video was not made out of pure spite or revenge, although those emotions were certainly driving my actions in that moment. More than anything, I felt he deserved to know the truth about what kind of person his sister had become and how she had been treating the man he had accepted as a future brother-in-law. I forwarded Jake's video to Ryan via text message along with a brief explanation of where and when it had been recorded. The timestamp on the footage clearly showed that it had been taken just hours earlier, making it impossible for Christina to claim it was old or taken out of context. The evidence was irrefutable and damning. Christina realized what I had done when she saw me typing on my phone, and her reaction was more intense than anything I had witnessed from her during the entire confrontation. She tried to grab my phone to delete the message, but it was already sent and delivered to her brother's number. The panic in her eyes was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The three of us stood on the sidewalk waiting for Ryan to respond to the message I had sent him. Christina was alternating between angry accusations that I was trying to destroy her family relationships and desperate pleas for me to contact Ryan and tell him the video was fake or manipulated somehow. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Ryan. His voice was cold and controlled when he asked me to confirm that the video was legitimate and recent. I told him the truth about everything that had happened that evening, from Jake's initial text message to the confrontation on the dance floor to the fight that had resulted in both men being ejected from the club. Ryan listened to my explanation without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification about specific details, but otherwise remaining silent on the other end of the phone line. When I finished telling him everything, he was quiet for almost a full minute before he finally spoke again. He told me that he would be withdrawing his financial contribution to the wedding immediately, and that he would be contacting the various vendors we had hired to cancel services that had been paid for with his money. The venue, the catering company, the photographer, and the band would all need to be notified that the wedding was no longer happening as planned. Christina could hear her brother's voice through my phone speaker, and she began sobbing uncontrollably as she realized that her betrayal was going to cost her much more than just our relationship. The wedding she had been planning for 8 months was falling apart in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop the chain reaction of consequences. Ryan ended the phone call by telling me that he was sorry I had been put through this experience, and that he had always considered me to be a good man who deserved better treatment. His final words before hanging up were directed at his sister, telling her that she had brought shame to their family name and that he was deeply disappointed in her choices. By Saturday evening, less than 24 hours after the confrontation at the club, Christina's carefully constructed world had collapsed more completely than either of us could have imagined. Ryan had followed through on his promise to contact every wedding vendor and cancel services that had been paid for with his contribution, but his actions had triggered a cascade of consequences that went far beyond just financial implications. The wedding venue required 60 days advance notice for cancellations, which meant that Christina was now personally responsible for paying the full cost of the reception hall rental despite the fact that no wedding would be taking place there. The $5,000 deposit was non-refundable, and the remaining balance of $12,000 was still due within 2 weeks according to the contract terms. The catering company had already ordered specialty ingredients and begun preparation work for our reception dinner, which meant they were also demanding full payment despite the cancellation. The photographer had turned down 3 other wedding bookings for our date and was threatening legal action to recover his lost income from the canceled appointments. But the financial devastation was only the beginning of Christina's problems, because Ryan had not kept the video to himself after receiving it from me. He had forwarded it to their parents, their older sister, and several close family friends who had been invited to our wedding ceremony. By Saturday afternoon, the footage was circulating through their entire social network. Christina's mother called her in tears, asking how she could have betrayed such a good man and brought disgrace to their family name. Her father refused to take her phone calls at all, communicating only through her mother that he was ashamed to call her his daughter. Their older sister sent a text message saying that Christina was no longer welcome at family gatherings until she made things right with me. The social media response was swift and merciless as family friends and extended relatives learned about Christina's affair through the video evidence. Her Facebook and Instagram accounts were flooded with comments expressing disappointment and disgust at her behavior. Several people posted publicly about canceling their travel plans for our wedding and demanding refunds for gifts they had already purchased. Christina's professional life began crumbling on Monday morning when the video somehow found its way to her colleagues at the marketing firm where she worked. Her boss called her into a closed-door meeting to discuss how her personal conduct was reflecting on the company's reputation and values. While her job was not immediately terminated, she was placed on probation and removed from client-facing responsibilities. The man she had been having an affair with disappeared completely from her life once the situation became public and messy. When she tried calling the phone number she had been using to contact him for 4 months, she discovered that it had been disconnected. He had apparently decided that their relationship was not worth the drama and complications that came with being exposed. Christina's apartment lease was in both of our names, which meant she was now responsible for paying the full monthly rent without my contribution. Her salary alone was not sufficient to cover the rent plus her car payment, student loans, and credit card debts that had accumulated during our engagement while she was spending money on her affair. The emotional toll of losing her family support, her social network, her lover, and her financial stability all within the span of a few days was visible in her appearance when she showed up at my apartment on Tuesday evening. She had dark circles under her eyes, her hair was unwashed, and she had clearly been crying for extended periods of time. She begged me to help her salvage something from the wreckage of her life, offering to go to counseling, to cut off all contact with other men, to do whatever it would take to earn back my trust and rebuild our relationship. But her pleas fell on deaf ears because the betrayal had been too extensive and too calculated for forgiveness. The wedding dress that she had spent 3 months selecting and having altered was hanging in her closet as a cruel reminder of the future she had thrown away for a 4-month affair with a man who abandoned her the moment their relationship became inconvenient for him. The invitations that had been mailed to 200 guests were now embarrassing announcements of a celebration that would never happen. By the end of the following week, Christina had been forced to move back in with her parents, who barely spoke to her except to express their disappointment in her choices. She had to explain to her friends and co-workers why her engagement had ended so suddenly and why she was no longer living in the apartment she had shared with me for 2 years. The ripple effects of that midnight text message continued to spread through both of our social circles for months afterward. People took sides in the situation, with the vast majority supporting my decision to expose her betrayal and end our engagement. Christina found herself isolated from most of the people who had been part of our shared social life. 6 months later, I learned through mutual friends that Christina had been forced to declare bankruptcy due to the wedding-related debts and her inability to maintain her previous lifestyle on a single income. She had taken a lower-paying job at a different company and was living in a studio apartment across town, having lost touch with most of her family and friends. The man who had seemed so confident and cocky during our confrontation at the club had moved on to other relationships without giving Christina a second thought. She had sacrificed everything for someone who viewed her as nothing more than a temporary diversion, and the realization of that fact became the final devastating blow to whatever remained of her self-respect. The consequences of that single night of being caught in her deception had destroyed not just our relationship and our planned wedding, but her entire life structure, her family relationships, her career prospects, and her financial stability, proving that some betrayals carry a price far higher than the betrayer ever imagined possible. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.